Have you ever walked away from someone feeling like your soul was drained, but couldn't explain why? Not because they yelled, not because they were cruel, but because every moment with them felt like you were slowly unraveling, thread by emotional thread. Carl Jung once warned that the most dangerous relationships are not the loudest. They are the quiet, unseen ones, the ones where you feel responsible for someone else's emotions, where you constantly shrink to make room for their chaos. You convince yourself you're being kind. You call it being supportive. But something inside you whispers that this is not love, it's extraction. This isn't ordinary neediness. It's a hidden contract of emotional dependency. A one-sided bond where your light becomes their oxygen. And what's worse, if you're an empath, you didn't stumble into this dynamic by chance. You were energetically selected, chosen, targeted. Your kindness, your intuition, your depth. It doesn't repel the wounded, it attracts them. But not all wounded people want to heal, some want to be carried. And they will subconsciously seek out those who carry well. You were taught to shine brighter, but no one taught you that some people only come closer to steal your glow. So the real question is not, why do I feel tired around them? The question is, what silent agreement have I made with pain that tells me I must stay? Because sometimes the exhaustion isn't physical, it's the grief of your soul trying to keep up with someone who never intended to walk beside you, only to lean on you forever. Let's explore why this keeps happening, and what it means when the empath finally says enough. What if the most exhausting relationship of your life wasn't built on connection at all, but on your silent permission to be emotionally used? Think about it. You were always the one listening, the one staying up late while they unraveled, while they cried, while they vented. They called you their rock, their light, their angel. But somehow, after every conversation, you felt heavier, not lighter. And what's worse, you blamed yourself for feeling that way. After all, aren't you supposed to be there for people you love? Carl Jung warned us that the most insidious forms of emotional manipulation are not aggressive. They are disguised as intimacy. The extractor doesn't demand attention. They drown in their story. They don't steal your joy. They collapse in your presence and wait for you to pour yourself out to refill them. You thought it was empathy, but in truth, it was entrapment. Imagine a friend who shares a dark secret with you, then calls you every night, replaying the same pain while refusing help or change. Or a sibling who always has a crisis right when you're thriving. Or a partner who only feels close when something is wrong, keeping your connection anchored in drama, never peace. At first it feels meaningful. They're opening up. You're bonding. But slowly you notice a pattern. When you're tired, they're unavailable. When you're struggling, they vanish. The flow only goes one way. Your light lifts them. Their darkness weighs you down. Jung understood this as unconscious energetic feeding, a mechanism where the wounded psyche seeks nourishment from a stronger one without ever learning to nourish itself. These people aren't evil, but they are stuck in an emotional childhood, needing constant holding. And when they find someone with a nurturing frequency, they attach, not to grow, but to survive. The real danger is not just what they take from you. It's what you begin to believe love is. One-sided giving, self-neglect, exhaustion disguised as devotion. You think this is what it means to be needed. But what if it's actually what it means to be used? So now we must ask, how many people in your life are sitting at a table you're setting but never bringing anything of their own? How many conversations leave you drained, yet guilty for pulling back? And more importantly, what wound in you keeps saying yes to being emotionally harvested? This is not an invitation to blame yourself. This is an awakening, because you're not just tired, you've been hosting someone else's healing while neglecting your own. And the soul was never designed to carry what another refuses to face. The good news? You can end the extraction without closing your heart. You can love without leaking. The first step is naming what's been happening, not as support, but as survival masked in intimacy. Now, let's explore why you were the one they found and why your light was never meant to be their permanent power source. Have you ever walked into a room and felt the tension long before anyone spoke? Or noticed how some people seem to lock onto you like you're a lifeline, even though you've shared nothing personal yet? This isn't just a coincidence. It's an energetic radar. People who have never learned to sit with their own emotional pain can instantly sense someone who has. Someone like you. Carl Jung understood this phenomenon not as flattery, but as a psychological warning. Those who are disconnected from their inner life become unconsciously attracted to those who are deeply connected. It's not your words that draw them in. It's your energy, your calm presence, your grounded emotional depth. To someone who is fragmented or emotionally immature, this is magnetic. You radiate the very thing they've exiled from themselves. You become a mirror for what they've suppressed. But instead of awakening, they want to feed. Imagine a woman in her 40s who has spent years healing from betrayal, rebuilding herself piece by piece. She has learned to listen to her inner voice, set boundaries, and trust her intuition. But then she meets someone, a man who seems intrigued, enchanted even. At first, he praises her strength. He calls her depth rare. But soon, he begins testing her emotional limits, guilt-tripping, withdrawing, drawing her into cycles of confusion. And because she still wants to believe in love, she gives the benefit of the doubt, until her body is depleted, her mind foggy, her spirit tired again. What felt like resonance was actually resonance of a different kind. He had sensed her light, and without knowing why, tried to absorb it. This is what Jung referred to as the dynamic between the conscious empath and the unconscious energy parasite. To be clear, not all who are wounded are harmful, but when someone refuses to take responsibility for their pain, they become dangerous in ways they don't even understand. They may not intend to harm you, but they will, because their psyche is seeking regulation, and your energy becomes their medicine, without your consent. So, here's the hard truth. The more light you carry, the more likely you are to attract those who are stuck in shadow. Not because you're doing anything wrong, but because they feel safer around your groundedness than they do in their own chaos. You feel like home to those who have none. You feel like peace to those who live in emotional war zones. But just because they find shelter in you doesn't mean they plan to build a home with you. Have you noticed how you often become the one people confess to, or the one they reach out to when their world falls apart? Why do they feel so comfortable opening up to you, but resist being there when you need the same? Why do they disappear when you start showing your own needs? These are not accidents. These are psychological patterns. The question is not whether you're kind or compassionate. The question is whether you've learned to protect the sacred frequency of your presence. If your kindness is a faucet always running, those who thirst will keep coming, regardless of their intentions. But if your energy becomes sacred, guarded by awareness and boundaries, only those who are whole enough to drink with gratitude will remain. So ask yourself, do they truly see you? Or do they only see what they can take? The soul knows. Your nervous system knows. And as Jung reminds us, until we make the unconscious conscious, it will rule our lives, and we will call it fate. Let this be the moment you stop calling it fate. Let this be the beginning of conscious, empowered connection. Not everyone who feels drawn to you deserves access to your light. Some are just cold, and you're the nearest fire. Why does the same kind of person keep showing up in your life wearing different faces? It begins so subtly that you almost believe it's a coincidence. You meet someone who seems fragile, who needs your compassion, who makes you feel as if you're the only one who understands them. At first, this attention feels flattering, almost sacred. But slowly, the familiar weight returns. The late-night phone calls, the unending problems, the constant need for reassurance. You tell yourself you're being kind, but inside, you feel the same exhaustion you once felt in another relationship with another face, years ago. Carl Jung would have called this repetition compulsion, the unconscious drive to recreate unresolved emotional patterns until they are made conscious. For many empaths, this cycle starts in childhood. A father who only acknowledged you when you solved his moods, a mother who relied on you to be her emotional confidant. You grew up thinking love meant carrying what was never yours. And so, in adulthood, you meet the same energy in lovers, friends, and colleagues, almost as if the universe were staging a play you never auditioned for. Consider the woman who always ends up with partners who crumble into helplessness, leaving her to mother them until she is empty. Or the man who becomes the emotional dumping ground for his siblings, repeating the same suffocating role he once played with his parents. These patterns are not random. They are archetypal loops, psychic traps that the unconscious orchestrates until awareness breaks the spell. But here is the deeper truth. The people who drain you are not here to teach you more endurance. They are here to push you to awaken. Jung insisted that the shadow of others only has power when it finds unacknowledged wounds inside of us. Every manipulative parent, every needy partner, every drama-filled colleague is less of an enemy and more of a mirror, showing us the parts of ourselves still hungry for validation, still afraid of setting limits. So the question becomes, how many times will you play this role before you see the script? How many more sleepless nights? How many more apologies? How many more one-sided relationships will it take before you realize that hosting pain is not love? The healing begins when you recognize the pattern as a pattern. When you stop asking, "Why do they keep doing this to me?" and instead ask, "Why do I keep saying yes to it?" That shift in perspective is not self-blame, it is self-liberation. Because once you see the trap, you can step out of it. And here lies the hopeful turning point. What looks like abandonment to others may actually be your first act of true belonging to yourself. Breaking free from these patterns is not cruelty, it is clarity. It is the moment you reclaim the energy you have been pouring into others and begin to invest it in your own healing, your own joy, your own wholeness. What if the person you keep rescuing is not the problem, but a symptom of a wound that began long before them? You didn't choose to open the door to manipulators, emotional addicts, or narcissistic takers. That door was cracked open years ago in a place you barely remember but have never stopped feeling. Carl Jung believed that the empath is not born in calm waters, but forged in chaos. You learn to survive not by being loud, but by being aware, hyper-aware. You became the child who could sense tension in your parents' silence, who noticed when the air in the house changed, who knew when not to speak before anyone said a word. And so you grew up, not with love, but with a radar. You tuned yourself to detect pain in others before it exploded. You became the peacekeeper, the translator of moods, the emotional regulator in an environment where no one noticed your own needs. Your nervous system didn't learn safety. It learned anticipation. It didn't learn how to ask. It learned how to scan, soothe, and surrender. Now, decades later, that childhood skill is still alive inside you. But what was once survival has become your trap. Because here's the cruel irony: the same sensitivity that helped you survive in dysfunction is the very signal that draws dysfunctional people to you. Your calm energy, your patience, your quiet strength, they feel like home to the broken. Not because they love you, but because their unconscious recognizes your willingness to carry what they refuse to heal. Think of the friend who always collapses into crisis, expecting you to fix it. The romantic partner who never self-regulates, relying on your presence as their emotional crutch. The family member who guilt-trips you for having boundaries. None of this is random. Your childhood chose this posture, and adulthood keeps reenacting it until you awaken. Jung taught that the unconscious repeats what the conscious mind refuses to confront. So long as you remain unaware of the origin of this pattern, it will camouflage itself in compassion. You'll tell yourself you're just being helpful, that they need me, or worse, that this is what love is. But deep down, you feel it. The quiet ache, the resentment building, the depletion that no one sees. So here is the turning point. What if the deepest act of healing is not to be more available, but to become more aware? What if love is not measured by what you carry for others, but by what you finally release within yourself? When you realize you didn't let them in, your unhealed self did, you stop blaming and start reclaiming. That is not a weakness, it is awakening. And once you see that the entry point was never your kindness, but your trauma, you can begin the process of sealing that space not with walls, but with worth. Because true healing is not about becoming less empathic. It is about learning that your empathy is sacred, and not everyone gets a front row seat to it. Have you ever asked yourself why your kindness often feels like a magnet for pain? Why your open heart, so generous, so understanding, keeps getting pulled into situations that drain you, confuse you, or leave you feeling used? This isn't just a coincidence. It's a pattern rooted in your unconscious conditioning. Carl Jung warned that those who don't learn to protect their inner light are destined to repeat cycles of emotional exhaustion, especially empaths, who often confuse love with responsibility. The answer is not to become harder, colder, or distant. It is to become more conscious. That is the essence of healing. Jung's solution was not for the empath to shut down their sensitivity, but to awaken with intention. Instead of collapsing into burnout or becoming hypervigilant, he proposed a more sacred alternative, a framework that honors both your softness and your strength. This is where the LIGHT method begins. L. Listen to energy. Every interaction leaves an imprint. Think about the last conversation you had that left you depleted. Now compare it to one that energized you. Your body knows. Your nervous system doesn't lie. Jung believed the unconscious reveals itself through feeling-toned complexes, emotional charges that live beneath the surface. When you listen to energy rather than words, you start to detect when your inner child is being triggered, when your shadow is being poked, or when your soul is being silenced. Ask yourself, does this space expand me or contract me? You don't need a logical reason to walk away from what shrinks you. Integrate your shadow. Many empaths unconsciously need to be needed. They mistake service for self-worth. This is not compassion, it's self-abandonment in disguise. Jung taught that the parts of ourselves we disown, our need for validation, our fear of being unlovable, become shadow material that leaks into our relationships. To break free, you must look at the wound that keeps whispering, "If I give enough, they will finally see me." Integration means calling that voice into the light and responding with truth. You don't have to earn love. You already are it. G. Guard your energy. Boundaries are not walls. They are filters of consciousness. They are not there to keep people out, but to keep you in. Every time you say yes when you mean no, you fracture your soul. Jung emphasized that individuation requires separation, not from love, but from enmeshment. Can you give yourself permission to decline without guilt? Can you let silence speak for you when words only entangle? H. Honor your light. The world has taught sensitive people to shrink, to mute their intuition, to be more normal. But Jung knew the rarest gifts are often misunderstood by the collective. To honor your light is to stop dimming your radiance to fit into dull rooms. It is to stop trading your depth for approval. The more you accept your sensitivity as a form of inner intelligence, the more you align with your purpose. T. Transform trauma. Pain that is not transformed is transferred. When your suffering becomes a source of wisdom, not martyrdom, you become powerful. Not because you dominate, but because you discern. Jung believed the alchemist's true task was not to avoid suffering, but to turn it into gold. Can you bless the wound, not because it was right, but because it awakened you to what's real? So here is the question. What if your healing isn't about changing who you are, but remembering who you were before the world told you to dim your light? The empath's path is not about becoming someone else. It's about coming home to a self that is both soft and sovereign, open yet untouchable. Tell me, which part of the LIGT framework speaks to you most right now, and what will you choose to do with that awareness? What if the very thing that made you feel like a misfit for most of your life was actually your superpower waiting to be understood? Many empaths grow up believing they are too sensitive, too emotional, or too reactive to the world around them. They were often the children who cried when others didn't, who sensed conflict before it erupted, who tried to hold a crumbling household together with a smile and silent strength. But what if this emotional attunement wasn't a flaw, but a form of emotional intelligence that simply developed too early, without guidance or protection? Carl Jung believed that true transformation comes when we no longer reject our nature, but begin to consciously evolve through it. For the empath, this means shedding the shame of being too much and embracing a higher truth. You were not built to carry everyone's pain, but to learn how to transmute it, first within yourself, then through your presence. The journey from unconscious empath to sovereign empath is not about hardening your heart. It's about awakening your awareness, and that journey unfolds in stages. In the first stage, the unconscious empath, you are like a sponge in human form. You absorb everything. Other people's moods dictate your own. You feel tired after conversations, yet guilty if you don't show up for someone's emotional breakdown. You confuse compassion with obligation. You think your worth comes from how much you sacrifice. And even when you're completely drained, a part of you believes you're still not doing enough. Then comes the conscious empath. This is the painful awakening. You start noticing the pattern. You realize that love is not supposed to hurt this much, and presence is not supposed to cost your peace. You set boundaries, but they wobble under the weight of guilt. You say no, then question if you're selfish. You take space, but feel like you're abandoning people. In this stage, the heart is waking up, but the inner child still fears rejection. This is where many adults in their 30s, 40s, and even 50s find themselves stuck, wise enough to recognize toxicity, yet still emotionally tied to the idea that love equals suffering. Finally, there is the sovereign empath. Here, the evolution is not louder, but quieter. You no longer chase approval. You no longer trade your peace for belonging. You begin to embody emotional discernment, the ability to feel deeply without drowning. You become a mirror, not a sponge. You don't abandon your empathy, you elevate it. And this is the stage where your light becomes a gift, not a trap. So, where are you on this path? Can you feel your evolution unfolding, even if it's messy and slow? What would happen if you stopped apologizing for your depth and instead learned how to channel it with clarity and power? Healing, as Jung said, is not about becoming someone new. It is about remembering who you were before the world taught you to be small. You were never broken. You were built this way so that you could eventually become whole, radiant, and free. Let this be your reminder. You are not here to fix others. You are here to remember yourself. What happens when you finally stop abandoning yourself for the comfort of others? The world begins to whisper that you've changed. Some will say you've become distant. Some will accuse you of being cold, guarded, and unrecognizable. But pause and ask yourself, is it truly coldness, or is it clarity? Is it really detachment, or is it the first breath of freedom from an old emotional contract that was never yours to sign? Carl Jung taught that transformation is not always graceful. It often looks like a rupture before it becomes a revelation. You are not just evolving, you are shedding a version of yourself that was shaped in response to other people's dysfunction. The self who said yes when you wanted to say no. The self who tolerated chaos to feel needed. The self who sacrificed peace to be loved. That was survival. But this is resurrection. You see, the more conscious you become, the more unconscious relationships fall away. It is not punishment. It is an energetic law. The frequency of your presence no longer matches the frequency of your past. And in that mismatch, a sacred threshold appears. You can either shrink to fit old spaces or expand into new ones, but you cannot do both. And the cost of choosing yourself will often be the comfort of those who preferred the previous, more compliant version of you. This is what Jung called individuation, the soul's return to its own center. It is not about rebellion, it is about reunion. You are not pushing people away. You are stepping back into alignment. You are not selfish. You are sacred. You are no longer food for those who refuse to feed themselves. You are no longer a mirror for someone else's denial. You are no longer dimming your light to survive in dark rooms. And yes, it's lonely at first. But that loneliness is not emptiness. It is spaciousness. It is your inner sanctuary rebuilding itself. It is where real connection will finally find you, not because you're useful, but because you're real. So let them talk. Let them misunderstand you. Let them call your evolution a betrayal. They are not witnessing your collapse. They are witnessing your return to your essence, to your energy, to your truth. You don't owe the world the version of you it created out of fear. You owe yourself the version of you that is rooted in love. And the moment you stop justifying your healing is the moment you truly begin to live. Let this be your quiet revolution. You are allowed to outgrow who you were in order to remember who you are. Now tell me, have you felt it too? That soft but certain voice inside that says, "This time I choose me." If this touched something sacred inside you, don't let it fade into silence. Like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Your presence here is not just support, it's resonance. And if you feel moved to give back, your donation becomes a quiet but powerful gesture that helps keep this light alive for others still walking in the dark.